Hello, everyone. Hold on to your seats because we have an electrifying guest with us today. We can't keep calm because the one and only Odess is here. He has been at the forefront of reimagining access technology and its role in modern connected living experiences. A globally renowned access control influencer, thought leader, consultant, speaker, and author, Lee is not just a believer in security at your front door. He envisions access as the key to enabling spaces and creating seamless experiences. Throughout his illustrious career, he has dedicated himself to helping owners and operators adopt cutting-edge technology to provide safe access, deliver innovative residential experiences, and future-proof buildings. Lee, we are absolutely stoked that you agreed to join us today to share your unparalleled expertise in the world of access control and smart locks. Welcome to Work the Talk.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'll do my best to live up to what you just said. So thank you.
There's so much we want to ask you, and we want to probably dive right in because there's so much to answer as well. The first question is around your passion for exploring the potential of an overall access control ecosystem. Truly, that truly sets you apart, right? Can you share with our listeners what drives your interest in the industry?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Yeah, there's not a lot of people that are just focused on the access control industry and digital locks, especially on the global side of it. But I see it as somewhat of it's been a nascent sort of industry that delivers a ton of value in a lot of ways, right? Like the essence of our industry is keeping people safe. So there's a sort of an intrinsic sort of value of what we do as an industry, which I find interesting. It's also a utility in buildings. It's one of those things that not a lot of people think about but interact with on a daily basis. I also look at it as it's something that we do every single day habitually that impacts the way that we engage with spaces that are around us. So it's this very important thing that, in my opinion, has bored people to death over the past 30 years. And they've done it for a lot of good reason. The good reason was it was one of those things that, because it's like high risk, right? People getting stabbed and shot at your places and safety sort of being at the core. It was sort of said as like, let us handle it as an industry. You don't need to worry about it. We'll take care of it, right? So what was been a feature of our industry, which is like, we're the experts, don't worry about it, has become a bug, because now as the industry starts to move more mainstream, there's a lot more interest in it, but we don't know how to really tell a story. So I saw it as an opportunity where, if you believe the adage that software's eating the world, or if you believe a bunch of assumptions that we're in the process of a digital transformation, I believe that there was the need to have a conversation around something as extremely important as it is, about where we're going and what we're doing and having point of views. And I like personally to build community. This industry has been very good to me personally. I like the people around it. I also wanted to wake up every single day and like doing what I do. And so I try to mix a bit of what I like doing with this industry. It's a niche. I also believed in reading, right? There's this whole idea that if you can get a 1,000 people to engage with what you do, you can create a business around it. So I saw it as a business opportunity as well. So put all of those things together, it equaled the reason why I do what I do on a daily basis.
This is very interesting, and honestly, we also learn a lot from what you write. So that's very interesting, and we're very happy that we're having this conversation. So moving on, we have, in our conversations with thousands of workplace and managers, we have come to realize that they often grapple with a dilemma. Security measures are sometimes perceived to be limiting, disliked, or even cause friction for employees and visitors. On the other side, workplace experience demands convenience, fluidity, seamlessness. How can workplace managers strike a balance between these seemingly opposing forces with the help of technology?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's go backwards first before we go forward. And if we go backwards and you look at sort of how our industry has approached safety, and it's really been around barriers. And we've been in the business of inconvenience. Like that was actually, more barriers, bollards, locks, doors, space. Like that's a design philosophy around how to deliver safety. So the way that our systems have been built over the past, call it 30 years, but you can even go back to, remember, like when they were pushing boulders in front of caves, like that was about keeping bad people out. Like that was our core value proposition, right? And then as things became more electronic, it was like, let's keep bad people out still, but now let's handle locking and unlocking. So this idea, when we digitized the mechanical side of our industry, or the boulders in front of caves that happen to now turn into doors and locks, the idea was we're going to continue to just keep bad people out. So as the expectations of the market have changed, where this idea, like anything that was considered convenient was considered bad, right? So like convenience in our old world was like, yeah, leave the door open.
Yeah.
Now, though, the definition of convenience is different than what they think the belief and the thoughts of what convenience means when it comes to our industry. So we have a redefinition problem that has to happen. So it leads me to this idea that the mindset has to first change in a lot of ways. Like the mindset that anything is convenient is bad. Because nowadays, when you put the phone in my hand, I use this on a daily basis, being the phone, and I say things like, you can't deliver convenience to security. It's like, well, I've got this. It delivers convenience to security all the time. So the customer is becoming a lot smarter, frankly, in challenging our conventional wisdoms. We also have external forces now coming in, people that don't come from the security industry, saying, yeah, no, that's not how this can work. We know we can deliver security and convenience, so we're going to go do it. Or we're going to layer conveniences on top of the people that do security. So it's a mindset change. It's something that needs to be demanded by the customer base and to not fall victim to the legacy side of our industry, which has good intentions, but can also get in its own way. You look at a lot of the legacy systems, they do struggle with this because they were never built this way. For 30 years, they were built on keeping bad people out and inconvenience. But now the use case is different. And what you see is this new crop of technology companies sitting on top of those systems and to go do that and deliver. So you can get both best roles. And then now you have new companies coming in that are starting with what I would say are some of the fundamental architectures that can deliver convenience and security. So things like cloud-based and mobile-based computing with APIs, building in user experience at the sort of the beginning, because again, our industry didn't care about user experience. Now we do.
Yeah.
And this is where like you can see it trickle down. Visitor management used to be our industry. And I say our being the old security side. Coming out of COVID is where you saw a shift happen where everybody became visitors. And it's really the name visitor management is actually, it's labeled legacy wise, and it's not really what we're talking about. If anything, what it is now is sort of a digital interface to the access control industry, where before it was a visitor management. It was like, you don't know I'm here. This is me showing up to your place. This is the process and the system that I use to express that it's me. Then you can figure out what to do with that. That's what visitor management used to be. Now, this is an interaction that happens with people as they show up. Our industry just never, in a lot of ways, got there with it. It was always a side hustle for our stuff around compliance. Then you had a bunch of new companies come in through COVID, especially because of health attestations and this ability to get access to the building remotely. Like, so it's just an overall mind shift change of your expectations. So that's what I would say if I'm looking at this of like how to deliver it. We got to start there first. It is a technical problem, but before you even get to the technical problem, it's a mindset problem.
Got it. Very, very interesting take actually on this. Now, I have a slightly different tangent. Now I'm going to a slightly different tangent. Workplace managers are also tasked with many activities, and one important one is optimization. And they often focus on three crucial aspects of optimization. One is efficiency, second is productivity, and third is satisfaction, right? Now, can you share any anecdotes or success stories from your experiences that shed light on how access control systems have contributed to enhancing these aspects in the workplace?
Yeah, I can. And I would start, though, if I could, I would say that the workplace optimization people should also, in addition to efficiencies, productivity, and satisfaction, it should start with security and safety. So they're like, because I don't care how efficient your place is, how productive it is, and how satisfied. If people aren't safe and don't feel safe, they're not going to go there. So if you start with it, I would say, and it's their responsibility also to keep that in forefront. That, to me, that's an example of people not thinking about safety and security and the aspects of what they do and leaving it. But now, So that said, that's my soapbox. I'll get off it. And moving to the next thing would be, yeah, I mean, some specific use cases in success stories. If you take a look at the one card scenario you see colleges and universities, for instance, where this idea of a single identity in whether it's even using a card or a fob or your mobile device, the ability for you to have an experience on campus that whether you enter into a facility, you use your identity to do it, your phone to get into your building, into the school classrooms. You buy books with it, you buy food with it, you check into the healthcare with it, you go to the stadium with it, you rent bikes, you communicate with it. Like your entire world is built kind of around your identity inside of a one card solution. They call it one card, but it could be mobile. One card, like that to me is a microcosm of what's happening in buildings and with enterprises currently right now. We're shifting to mini cities, basically. And I'm getting federated identity of who I am through those, and I can use them across, right? So that's one example of doing it. Now, how that journey would look like in a building, parking, elevators, the front desk, the ability to buy food with it, doing printing. I could rent a bike. I can check into a room, check out of a room. I can communicate. I can team with people all around what is traditionally, in my opinion, kicked off by the ability for me to enter into a space. Once I get in there, I can do anything I want through that with a single identity that helps increase efficiencies, productivity, and also I think will drive overall satisfaction as well and engage on that side. There's some other things you can do, like in the system, I would say that it's sort of straightforward, but like the issuance of credentials and the deauthorization of credentials, that workflow is, I think, even more important now when things are hybrid or remote and you just don't go to the, before you'd go to the card room and you would go and they'd give you your access and you take it. And man, if you had like 10 locations, you had 10 different cards typically to go do that. Now you want the flexibility on demand. You don't know where people are working, the rest of this and that. It just makes it easy. Another one is visibility to free rooms. So this idea that when I'm in the space, we've all done it. You book a meeting, you have, room A, you think it's open, you get there, there's somebody inside of it. Then you spend the next 20 minutes looking for a free space. That's extremely inefficient. It's not productive. And frankly, no one's ever happy and satisfied for that. So by digitizing that whole experience and around access control, understanding when people are on site, when they're not, what rooms are available, all that is good. So those are 3-4 examples of how I would think like these are success stories of what we see people doing now, where access control goes beyond keeping bad people out, but this is like letting the right people in and creating value beyond locking and unlocking.
Very interesting. And I think many of our thoughts are also getting validated by what you're saying. So I'm happy the work is heading there. So it's evident that workplace managers have a challenging role and they have to balance a lot of tasks. And unfortunately, their work isn't easy because the current state of workplace technologies, with each place having its own set of disparate systems, leading to fragmented experiences, data localization, be it visitor management, be it space booking solutions that we just talked about, be it video surveillance, or even, employee wellness portals. We often hear about companies investing a significant amount of resources in deploying various technologies. Yet those systems seem to operate independently, lack interoperability. As the ecosystem rapidly advances, and I imagine there's a need for a cohesive solution that can bring together diverse workplace technologies under a unified umbrella, right? In your latest brief also, you talked about marketplaces, operating systems, platforms, middleware, and more, all showcasing a new idea of the future. Now, what role will integrations play in shaping this future, where data from different sources flows seamlessly and users and managers can navigate easily between different systems and environments without friction? And if you have any successful implementations like this in mind, please do mention.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and I think this is where, again, we go backwards to go forward, right? If you look at the initial way our systems were built, like integrations were heavily on just the security side, like cameras into access control systems or, biometrics into access control systems. So it was I'll call it, for like inside baseball, like it was very specific to the security. And we rarely did things outward. If we did, it was customer driven, like, hey, I've got a workplace automation tool that I want you to integrate with, and we would do like a one-off for it, but it was never seen as really a business driver. Whereas now the expectations of the workspace are changing to where people are demanding things like APIs, right? Like that was never, we had them kind of, but not really on that end. So this whole concept and idea, and that was like, I'm glad that you read the brief on that end. It was that question I asked, so like, who's going to be our industry's app store, was less about really who's going to be it and more around how the expectations of our systems change, of where like people discover what our SLAs need to be, where our role is in the system, how we build them, all of that stuff changes on that side. So whether it's the use of APIs, this idea around like credentialing issuance and authentication and authority of who's doing, like who is going to play that role, which I think is an area that we as an industry can, because that's where we've been before on that side. And a bunch of third-party products that, you know, we don't necessarily want to deal with as an industry, but we're having to now. So they're pulling our stuff into areas that go beyond, I would say, the traditional side of what our industry has been asked to go do on that side. But yeah, I think we're a long way away from being call it interoperable or standards, and we're on the beginnings of a much greater integrated system. So we're more integrated on that end, and I think it's all positive, because I think once that gets unlocked, the art of the possible happens. So where people can take our utility and start to use it in forms that we may not even think about as an industry, nor do we have permission to do or the desire to go do. So let other people go do that while we still hold on to the core value proposition of what we bring on that side. And there's a lot of examples that we see that are out in the marketplace where people are using IWMS systems to do a lot of the stuff we talked about before, like visibility to rooms, this concept around, you know, one card on your phone, mobile, to do everything from printing and the rest of it, to even like some really mundane things like mustering. So mustering, for those that aren't familiar with it, you know, something bad happens, you want to know where everybody is. There's a whole lot more into it, but that's just the summary, right? So you have a way of making sure people understand there's an emergency. You have a way of expressing where people are at within the space. But I bundle that underneath notifications. Notifications has been forever an area that we haven't really thought about as an industry. It's always been like, I'll send a text message, or we'll have a report, and then somebody else has to go handle it over a PA system or whatever. But how we communicate to what is a new stakeholder, being the end user, is mundane in our industry because we've dealt with it for a long time, but is brand new because we have a new stakeholder that's coming out, right? So somebody's going to do something well there in a good way, and it's going to add a ton of value. And I don't know, I get kind of interested in this idea too of like, where are areas that you think about AI and places will impact our industry. To me, that's a great way to where AI can take a look at, you know, here's what's happening in a situation, now go quickly communicate and handle information sharing and whatnot. So I that's just one example of how I think it's being impacted currently now, where we're integrating that is maybe mundane but high value, and just the beginning of what's going to happen moving forward.
That's very insightful, actually. Now, with the deep integrations at play, with a mindful shift towards letting the right people in that you just talked about, comes a massive business opportunity for the access control systems to become the hub for a whole host of other services. And I think it is very evident from one of your interviews, I think you gave with IFSEP Global, that suggests that access control market is perfectly placed to take the advantage of a $60 billion enterprise software opportunity, right? Now, when such softwares are into play, where the system sits on top of access control, so that when I walk in, I can control just about everything in my phone, from tapping to enter the building, to ordering a latte, reserving a room, to booking a desk, asking for navigation, right? Much like what we are also thinking, it becomes even more essential for workplace managers to evaluate the scalability and future readiness of access control solutions. Can you elaborate on what aspects they should look for in software-centric solutions to ensure they can adapt and grow alongside the advancements in workplace technologies and security needs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say all of that is true as long as our industry wants to command the space that it can occupy, right? Like it needs to want to. But if I'm, to your question, if I'm looking to evaluate, I would approach it the same way you do enterprise software of other systems and look at it that way. It happens to be security and physical security, but there's a lot of attributes of how you would expect enterprise software to work. If you mix that together with how you would want the expectations of physical security to work, I think you get a good answer. So I'll leave the physical security side because it's somewhat well known, but I would just start asking, right? Like, what are your APIs, your SLAs, your support programs with your dealer network? Do you offer professional services? What's your systems architectures? Because you'll understand a lot. Like, is it cloud native? Is it not? You can then determine what's important to you, but at least you can start to ask these questions. Like, I think you learn a lot by saying, what's your integration list that you currently have now? Because there's some inherent sort of attributes that come along with that. If it's all stuff within security and nothing external, that gives you a good idea of where they play and where they're probably open to going. And then also, if they are integrated with some of these other systems, that comes along with some things as well, because the way those third-party systems work are probably going to have a set of expectations of how APIs work. And also, you can then do some due diligence. And if you know the person over, like, I don't know, say it's integrated into Salesforce or, name another company, you can call over there and say, hey, how was it working with them? Like, you learn a lot that way. And then lastly, most of the companies I know of that are open to this and understand it, well, if you ask to get an understanding, even at a high level, what's your digital roadmap? That'll give you a good understanding what they're prioritizing. I talk about the sort of the old adage of arrows and wood behind the arrow. And what you have is in our industry, all the legacy is sort of like the wood behind the arrow. They've got no new arrows on the front end. And then you have a bunch of startups that have a bunch of arrows with no wood behind it. So we're like in that weird spot currently right now. Yeah. Now, what you could do is take some of those arrows and put it on the wood, and you make some great solutions. Or you could also get an understanding of who's building some wood because they only have arrows, and who's building some arrows because they don't have wood. Like that comes out of the roadmap of how they present it to you. And that would be my suggestion of how to approach it.
That's very interesting. Just to double down, security personnel and security managers are the ones who are usually evaluating for third-party vendors. And given the industry has been operating in a particular manner with a particular mindset, now with this software-centric approach, even that ecosystem, is it having, does it have to do a lot of catching up on asking the right questions to the vendors? Or how is the education side within the industry right now?
Yeah, there's always opportunity for catch up. There's also, though, I don't want to undervalue the center of excellence that we already do have in a lot of ways too. So there's a lot of expertise, especially when we get into like identity management and authentication and authorization of that. I mean, there's a lot that we already, because we've been doing it for a long time, and in a lot of critical spaces and use cases. So there's a lot to be learned there that the industry could share more of to the general. But then in the other areas, I mean, like there's very limited number of companies that have user experience capabilities. There's we're just starting from a legacy standpoint, the sort of the tools that are in place to make APIs and SDKs a lot easier to use. You got a lot of newer companies that are coming into the space that don't have, again, some of the sort of legacy side of feature sets so we're in that mix right now of, I call it the messy middle. It's like it's a phase change we're going. I wrote a book called The 6 Phase Changes Shaping Access Control, and we're literally in that period that, depending on which side of the phase change you're looking at, we either look like ice or we look like water. But it's like the mixture right between water turning into ice, where it's like you could be either. That's kind of where we're at right now. So it's messy. But the biggest thing that could happen is just by engaging and asking questions, because I find that you'll get the answers that you want, but I wouldn't expect to have all the answers brought to you, because it's just, we're immature in some of the newer formations of our industry.
That's true. Very, very interesting as well. Now, it's fascinating to ponder the future of access control in workplaces and how it will shape the overall landscape. And with your expertise and insights, we are very curious to know what you are seeing as the future. And there are two questions that I definitely have in mind around this. One is, are you seeing the convergence of the overall access technology? Now, there are there's so many ways where how access is defined. It could be an RFID card, it could be a camera, it could be mobile, it could be anything. Are you seeing that, eventually it's going to converge to a one reader and, one technology doing everything that is required, and on top, multiple solutions on that as well? That's one. The second is, and I just want to double down on what you initially said, after generative AI, what impact are you seeing on the industry, and how, what would be the area apart? Yes, one thing I think you talked about, mustering and notifications. Other than that as well, and maybe double down on that as well, how do you see the industry is going to change, and what's the impact going to be?
Yeah, no, that's good questions. And you know, I would look at it a couple things. So, you've got the future being an iteration off of the legacy, and then you've got a future which is brand new, right? So, like so when I answer these things, I think they can work for either of the way that we would look at our industry on that case. So, a couple things that I think are relevant, and I've got like 6 sort of trends, if you would, that I'll go over. Number one being computer vision, in my opinion, is going to impact our industry heavily. Now, it'll be a combination. You're kind of seeing it as an iteration off our systems where people are introducing readers with cameras inside of them and a back end sort of AI and a bunch of technology behind it, with this idea that I can walk up and it create a good experience because I don't have to do anything. So it understands intent, it understands who I am, it can authenticate and unlock, right? That's like an iteration off the old. Moving forward, though, what I think it becomes is the leveraging of infrastructure that's already there. So this is where cameras and things like that, because in my opinion, in areas where you want like high levels of assurance and high levels of throughput, like say a lobby of a building, it's not going to be done with a reader on the wall. It's not going to be done by mobile, in my opinion. It's going to be done by leveraging the integration and convergence between video and access control, to where a camera system understands situational awareness. It relays the information to the reader on the wall. There's some interplay between the reader and locality of where the people are at, and sort of assurance to where I can then bring people through turnstiles heavily, and maybe even get rid of turnstiles. I don't know. Like there's a lot to be said there, but I do believe computer vision is going to massively impact our industry, both current and then future. The other one is this new channels that are coming up. So if I look at like middleware companies, for instance, never really been a thing in our industry. And then also systems integrators. We've always been about security integrators. So this is not necessarily, this is part technical, but then also part market motion that I think is important. So we have an introduction of middleware companies, software-based ones, that are taking all of these disparate systems, which have historically been isolated to one, bringing them together under a single user interface or a third-party interface. Like I'll use Salesforce again. I manage my business from there. I want to manage my access control from there as well. And this is where you're seeing a separation, something I'm going to write about soon, which is the difference of like, we've been an industry about configuring systems. So like integrators would configure systems. We're turning and flipping now into one where the systems are managed. So I have a management layer now, which configuration will still be there, but at some point the management of the system gets extracted from the two, and they become two completely different disciplines that are doing. And it introduces new like middleware companies of technology, new systems integrators that are integrating not only access control systems but other third-party systems like Salesforce and Workday and all these other ones that I want to start using. That's a whole new world. It's not just integrated, it's actually integrating them into complete workflows that are different. It also opens up what I believe is going to be even more important, is the data sharing of our industry. Like, so big data, this is where we're going to start to see whether it's data visualization, the way that we manage data, the way we share data. Like there's a whole opportunity that comes out of data, which is really, our industry has been like log files, which a lot of low value, like in the same area of notifications. But now there's a whole group that is being created of not only creating pipes to share the data, but then also there's companies that are coming out to actually do data visualization. So I'm just excited to see what other people can do with the information that we have. Mobile's a thing right now that we'd like to talk about, and I get it, like card and phone, cool. But I actually think about the future of what it's going to do is it's an aspect of choice of modality as a user. And there's value that gets created beyond using it as a card that is going to, I think, unlock, no pun intended, but unlock new opportunities that we're not even thinking about as people start to use it in a much more dynamic modality, and it gets embedded into other things easily and stakeholders use it. This experience of me being able to just flow through places, I think, is going to start to happen. I'm also interested in, I'm seeing now, the future is going to look very different because the way people discover our systems is going to change. That goes back to the question, like, who's going to be our app store? Like, we've been a very predictable industry. If you wanted to learn about our stuff, you went to a security integrator or a trade show, and that's how you found it. Very sort of in person, very slow, very controlled, very predictable. To where now, who knows how people find out our stuff? It comes from online, TikTok, LinkedIn, new integrations, new integrators, new people, podcasts, like whatever, right? Like, so it's a lot harder. Like, our product marketing is not going to be the only thing that saves us anymore, like it has historically. We have to actually get smart in how we communicate, storytell, and market. And then lastly is big tech. I think big tech's influence into our industry, if you take a look at like what Microsoft just did with Microsoft Places, they made an announcement that it kind of went away, but this idea of integrating our industry into Outlook, for instance, and into sort of Microsoft's full suite of products, that's powerful. And what it's going to do with it, I don't know after that, but you can see what they do, Salesforce does, Google does. You know, you look at what Amazon's doing with delivery, where they're now double downing into the single day delivery globally and sort of investing heavily into that. Our industry is in the way, right? We're a friction point for that stuff to happen, both in business and the consumer. So I think about, like, they're like water. If they see friction, they go around it. So I got to believe they're going to not only create new people looking at our industry in different ways, but they're going to invest in areas to disrupt what is the traditional, and also partner with the traditional marketplace on that side. So those are some examples, I think, of what the future holds in areas of unknown that, you know, kind of get me excited to think about. When you go back to your first question, like why I got into this industry, this is the stuff that gets me excited because it's so unknown and it's changing so rapidly that it's rare that you have an opportunity to make such an impact into a utility of the way that we live, work, visit, play, whatever it might be.
That's beautifully the way you look at the industry. I think it's eye-opening, and thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge and insights. It's been an eye-opener for us to listen to the trends and innovations that are revolutionizing the industry. And to all our listeners, let me tell you something. Lee doesn't just sprinkle wisdom; he pours it into his monthly access control executive briefs. CEOs and executive teams, get ready to be blown away by his deep sector knowledge and the lowdown on all things smart locks, physical security, and access. This is the kind of information that gets us pumped and ready to take on the world every day. Trust me, Lee, we do keep forwarding what you write to our team, and that's actually why we were really excited that you were here. Thank you for tuning in to the episode of Walk the Talk. Stay curious, stay innovative, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.